it will leak and spray oil all over your hands and all over the job. You don't want that. So again, a little bit more grease. Grease is your friend here. It will slow down the corrosion, if you were to call it that. Not a lot, just to cover the surface. Just like I'm doing here, just a light, thin coating of the grease. And I will just eliminate the corrosion of the two halves. So make sure this notch is facing up. So if you want to pause the video, you can do that yourself. We're going to slide this in. While keeping your finger on here, we're going to make sure this hole lines up with this hole over here. If you want, you can just make a dot, but do know, don't hammer away at that, because it is sensitive. You don't want to put a ding where the oil hole is. Okay, now we're going to be getting ready for our 1/4 inch screws. These little guys, and the Loctite I'm using is this. I'm going to retouch the camera here so you'll kind of see what I'm trying to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our Loctite high strength, and then we're going to use a 1/4 inch Allen key to torque it up. And we're going to get our extension bar. This is off an old cylinder. This is a feeder pipe I used. A little bit softer material. If you want to, you can use a torque wrench, but I just kind of go by feel. I don't really need to torque it up. And just cover the threads with Loctite, nothing special. Make sure there's no real oil on the threads, or else the Loctite will not adhere to the threads. So we're just going to do that. So we're going to torque this up crisscross so that there are no warpage or any kind of weird way of torquing it down, almost like you're torquing a car tire, kind of like that. Again, just that much Loctite, you don't need a lot, just enough to cover the threads a little bit. And the reason why I didn't film this when I was taking it apart, because it was quite difficult to remove all the pieces, because they're sometimes seized on, or quite often now there's just simply the screw heads will strip. So what I quite often do is I get a nut, I put it on top of this and I weld it, and I just use a wrench and a lot of heat to remove that screw, because quite often that they seize up really bad. But generally that's not the case, but sometimes they do. Now this video only applies to the greenly and reliable Tampers only. The Stanleys and Burndies are very different in their inner workings, so if you're trying to figure out how to fix one of those, this is not the video for it. Again, some Loctite, make sure it's clean and dry. You can use brake clean or some kind of a car cleaner to clean the threads. That's so the Loctite will properly adhere to the surface that you're trying to screw them onto. Alright, we're going to use our torque bar now. I'm going to set this camera back a bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So I'm going to do a crisscross pattern. Make sure that is down all the way when you're torquing it. Okay, let's do the other side. The torque isn't that critical on these as long as it's tight. Drop that. So again, it's not critical for how tight these screws are, but what I generally go as a gauge is when this bar tends to bend a little bit. That's generally how tight I usually make these. I don't make them that tight. Use a hammer on this one. This one has a bit of a ding on there. Sometimes these bolts have dings on them. You can't get the key properly put in there. So I just get the hammer and tap them in and wiggle them out. You can go to your local part supplier and just simply buy new bolts if that's the case. But generally these screws are okay once you clean them all out. So that's the way we're going to be doing them. So again, we're going to torque it. Just kind of see that it's bending now. That's generally tight enough. I'm not really accurate. I'm not really calling for an exact torque. If you go to your, I don't know, parts breakdown, whatever brand, they'll probably tell you an exact torque on these bolts, but for me, I don't really care. I'll just do the torque of the weight of this wrench here, because they're basically all the same. I know the castings are different. So the reliables, they're smooth, there's no holes. The Greenlees have a Allen key plug located somewhere here. So that is a difference, but it doesn't adhere the compatibility. Alright, these are tight. This one I have to slightly bang in because it's there's a ding on the side here. I can't get that screw in all the way. Okay, that's tight. I'm just gonna make sure everything is tight because Loctite is hardening as we speak. Loctite won't harden on its own. It'll do it when there's a lack of oxygen. It's kind of weird how it works, but alright, it's tight enough. Don't go crazy on the torque, just light. If you don't feel comfortable, you can use 15 foot-pounds of torque if you want to be specific, but I don't really go that high. I go maybe 10, maybe. Depends on the what tool. Like Greenlees, they're a little beefier. Like the casting's just a tad beefier on the screws. The reliables, they're a little thinner, but they are compatible. The screws will match exactly. They're just cast slightly different. That little screw hole there. Okay, so that is torqued. Everything is torqued here. We're going to be putting our shaft in. So I'm going to move the camera over, and we're going to be packing the packing nut. I'm going to call it down. Get the blueprints and put it on here so we won't get them too dirty. So let's see if I can get that so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Just like that. We're going to get our seal kit. You don't have to order from the dealer. You can go to your seal supply